The road of yarn is only here to follow the rose of winter night. The love and charm to lift us from the hollow will sing this hymn for light. The fire rose, the melting of red hurt will overflow again. Your smile shows you aren't always sure. Your heart is on the mend. I'll take all you wish for, please ignore all my cries for answers, hurt no more. All the moments come together, moving picture, worn and weathered, all because of the fall into love where minds are baffled and time wins once again. Wash away the dancer, no one's there. Playing with the train set up until the sun sets, always something we could do. Showing me your workshop, teach me how to build stuff. I really do love you. You should know that my grandpa Harold is the strongest man I ever saw. The world don't need violence, it just needs more violence. Gramps would make them through and through. Running till he's 90 always could inspire me. Passion always burning true. You should know that my grandpa Harold is the strongest man I ever saw. Married to Ramona, lady of his dreams, kindest soul you've ever met, they'd sing in harmony. You should know that my grandpa Harold's still the strongest man I've ever seen. never let it go. You'll never let it go. I can't help you remember, 'cause you'll never let it go. You'll never let it go. We're coming in through here as well. And in mine. So we're unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Hello everyone, welcome. This is CTN Studio, and today we're going to have an AMA. Oh, I got a notification here. What am I supposed to do? Later? Are we still in?
Yeah, later. Yeah.
Am I still good?
Yes.
Yeah, alright. Just
We are
checking in.
live.
We are live. How you doing, everybody? Alright, so we got Jerry Rees here.
Oh,
And I'm sure
yep.
that...
Hey, howdy.
Yes, I'm pointing at you right here. We also have other camera angles that you could check out.
Including a 360 cam. So if you happen to have a head-mounted display and you want to sit right in the room, it's about 4 feet from me here. So you could do that.
Oh, I heard it go off. I'm not sure if I'm being seen right now on the 360 cam. All right, hello everybody. How you doing? So if you want to ask any questions, go ahead. We also have YouTube. We have Instagram.
And I believe I see Sky and Rusty and Kira and some other people that are on my screen here. So I see people in the room. There's James in the room with me as well.
And yeah, so.
A little delay on YouTube by like about a second, but it's okay.
Okay. So go ahead, ask your questions. We got Sky, we got Kira, we got all sorts of people here.
And I've just I've gathered on my laptop here as many files as I can sort of get handy for things that you might ask, and so we'll just wing it.
All right, so I'll go ahead and set up, and anyone can ask a question.
Let me see. So I have various things, like I have my first pass when I came in, when I was in my teens and was checking out the animation studio, for example. So I have a number of things from those early days, including CalArts the first year. I've got things from Toaster. I've got things from the parks. I even have a list that sort of goes through 22 Disney theme park attractions, acting in a directorial capacity, etc. So there's a lot of things we could explore there if you're interested in the park things. And also brought some videos from various projects, including things like Mystic Manor, mock-up videos for different scenes from Mystic Manor and things like that. Soaring Fantastic Flight, Cinemagique, Sounds Dangerous, Space Jam. Actually, that's kind of crazy that.
Someone has a question. They're asking if they could be unmuted. Do you want to
Yes, we have Kira. We got Kira that wants to be unmuted.
Sure, we can ask
All right, Kira.
ask a question. Sure.
Go ahead and ask her. No, do we have her yet?
Waiting for an unmute.
She needs to unmute.
Yep.
All right, Kira, you gotta unmute yourself. Oh, Kira, you don't have a question yet? Oh, I thought you had a question.
Okay.
My bad, Kira. We just put Kira on the spot.
Somebody
No
else
worries.
is happy to ask a question. Someone else in there, Alan.
Let's see. Who else has got a question?
Mystic Manor, Marvel Experience, Marty Scott. Maybe I could just.
But I get
Also, we have, by the way,
Oh, I see. We have a question from Sky. Sky has a question.
Sky Gleason, perchance.
Yes. From
Uh-huh.
Gleason, yes.
Yes, perchance. Hello.
Hi, Sky.
Hi. I once upon a time I did work in the theme park industry as the IT guy for Landmark Entertainment. Once,
Aha.
and they created Sanrio, is that right? Over in Japan. Anyway, so I have some history with the theme park industry, but it's been a while. But my current question, can I ask a contemporary question? Because I'm very fascinated with your past.
Sure, absolutely. And I believe me, I'm diving headlong into future tech as much as celebrating where we've come from. So
Okay, well, then you decide how you want to answer this question. As AI is now becoming public, is a tool that is has no barrier to entry. Apparently, everybody with an iPhone and a Discord channel can participate. Unlike when you and I started, we had to have thousands of dollars worth of equipment to play. So, where does artificial intelligence now fit into your creative process, or does it yet?
It does. I actually was an executive R&D Imagineer for 5 years, 2015 to 2020, just before the pandemic. And so I was creative lead on conversational characters, AI conversational characters, and free walking autonomous robots. So I got to take a creative lead in those areas. And there was so much development left for AI, which has a lot of capability, and it's definitely robust and is kind of amazing. Has a lot of impressive aspects to it. But to curate AI systems so that they actually create unique, one-of-a-kind characters that have either replicating an iconic character you already know and love, like Winnie the Pooh, or somebody drastically different like John Wick. you know, these are individuals. They're not just archetype. Winnie the Pooh is not just an archetype. It's way beyond archetype to eccentric individual behavior. And that goes far beyond just an appearance. It goes far beyond just text-to-speech things that can be pretty impressive. It's a curated worldview through one character's mind. And as they learn new things in the world, making sure that they stay in character is key. And then also, most of their appearance as a character is through behavior. I mean, it's what a character does when it's listening to you makes them come alive as a living, thinking being. So if you're talking about something that is sad or amusing, having a character without talking to you, I'm not talking about the text-to-speech answer that, chat has prepared for you. I'm talking about them just listening. So are they amused? Are they empathetic? That particular character might have a PTSD from some kind of experience with what you're talking about. So that one character might start doing a nervous fidget because it's a tell that they're uncomfortable with what you're talking about. All that stuff that makes one character come alive in the midst of all these emerging novelties, and it's unfair to call them tricks, but it is in a way it is the novelty that equates to me back to the first days when Walt Disney and the team and all the industries that were competing with them had sort of the novelty of drawings that seemed to move. So suddenly, stacks of drawings under cameras showed in sequence, suddenly the novelty of like, oh my God, drawings seem to be moving was everywhere. And where Walt and his team differentiated themselves was not just sort of staying in the novelty and sort of the miracle of that, but they pushed further to go, okay, I get that it's moving. We know that. Now that it's moving, how do I have it behave so that one character proves to me it has its own thoughts and feelings, and it's different from the character next to it who has its own thoughts and feelings. And I don't just know that because it blabs what those thoughts and feelings are. It's because of its body language when it's just being alive. And it's because of how it reacts to what other characters are doing. It's how it reacts to the world. It's how it reacts to what's being said to it. So even though it wasn't real time, their mission was to make it seem like, in the moment that the story beat happened, that it was a real time thinking, feeling character that was one individual beyond archetype to the eccentric of one. And so sitting with AI development teams where they would have all these things they could do to get mass data to do, like the average of what mass data would do is X. And I go, okay, but the difference between that mass data thing, which is cool, the spike of difference between that and Henry Selick is what makes him emerge as an individual. The spike between the mass data and Tim Burton or Rebecca Rees or any of my friends, the spike of difference between that mass average where it can convince you, yep, things are living and moving. And we see that all around us, but we are constantly, whether we're aware of it or not, most of us are not aware of it, we're in a symphony of eccentrics all the time. If people were not eccentrically individually one, and they were just kind of mimicking each other, we would just get creeped out. And I think, frankly, a lot of the sort of uncanny valley stuff has to do with that. It's general movement, it's like, yeah, they're kind of behaving, but they're not truly eccentric ones. If you go into a room, even if you've never met people before, and what you encounter is they're all eccentric one-of-a-kinds. And we're a symphony of that. We sense that. Everybody is sitting differently in a room, even if they aren't doing anything. People have different activities, different ways to kill the time. When we just feel that symphony of difference, like, boom, everyone is eccentric individual. The moment we come in, we just feel comfortable. If everybody's sitting the same way, if everybody's doing the same gesture, it's like, we wouldn't quite know why, but we'd really be creeped out. And I think a lot of early games are getting better and better at that, but a lot of early games, I think, had these sort of rituals and cycles and things of sameness that would happen. And you go, yeah, it all is kind of moving and behaving, but it's not emerging as one person at a time that is in the group. And we feel weird about that. And so I think AI is going to go through that same phase where at the beginning there's that rush of, it's like back in the Disney days, it's like, oh my God, the drawings can move. That's amazing. And it's like, well, that becomes kind of boring after a while until you go, now carve all of that into Winnie the Pooh exists, Dumbo exists, and in people that your friends exist. I mean, the difference between just a woman and your mom and knowing it's that your mom, even when she's walking in the distance, like that thing that makes you one is what is exciting to us. And that's what ultimately connects us for social engagement. Whether we're engaged with recognizing a friend who happens to be in this shared social environment, we go, oh, I didn't know you were going to be here, and we strike up a conversation, or we just or we see an iconic character where we go, I know that character is behaving exactly as itself right now. It's not the cheap, quick sketch version that you would put in, like if you're just going to review it for a few seconds in an experience. No, this is the deep dive. I can go up and talk to it, and it is truly his or herself or itself. That difference in AI will have to emerge eventually to keep it interesting. So I think system designers, I used to spend so much of my time dealing with brilliant system designers, but talking about how to carve out those differences for individuals. And one example that it's kind of illustrative in a general way of looking for getting off of just averages of mass data, is they were trying to build a system so they could have as much as possible skip the deliberation engine and just go directly to a sensor picks up something automatically and action happens in all characters. It's like, let's just propagate it out there. So that one happened to be a loud noise equals a flinch for all characters.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's a given. We don't have to think about that. We don't have to know their history or whatever. It's just like, loud noise equals flinch, done. And I went, wait. And they're like, what? I said, you're tying my hands as a storyteller. Like, what? It's a loud noise. It's a flinch. So I go, okay, let's go through a story beat. You have a middle-aged man who's come to visit a family, and the family's preparing a meal. And while he's waiting in the living room, 6-year-old daughter of the family is sitting there waiting for the events to happen. And she's kind of giggly and having fun. And the two of them sitting together suddenly hear a slam of a screen door, super loud. The guy goes into a fetal curl that's much more than the normal reaction. The little girl has a huge smile on her face and runs directly toward the loud sound. Well, she knows the screen door slamming is her friend coming over to play. And they've been doing this all summer. So to her, like, that loud noise is fun. To him, he's come back from war, and that's a bomb exploding. So I'm like, sorry guys, I know for the system efficiency and like quickly pushing things out there, we could skip all of that. But if you really want to have a rich world where we can tell stories, and not only tell stories, but have people in those shared immersive spaces who can be themselves and not have their own behavior averaged away to what people might do. It's like, what would you do? They had to think about building systems in a way that accommodated customization sort of constantly. So that's just an example of what we dealt with. And I go to another example of people emerging as individuals. Just if you were around a campfire and you're telling a story and you have several characters that are listening now, they might all be AI characters, but they're one-of-a-kind AI characters that hopefully emerge as unique. So while I'm telling the story, or while you're telling the story, you might be getting into some really dramatic things. One of the characters sitting around the campfire while they're roasting marshmallows is really engaged and empathetic and is on the edge of its seat for every single word you're saying. And when you tell something that's frightening, they really feel it and they cower. And the character sitting next to them, and by the way, they're not saying anything yet, so there's no text-to-speech happening. It's just I'm doing the talk. They're just living.
Yeah.
The character next to it, those same times where the first one is concerned and empathetic and engaged, second one is sort of scoffing, just like thinks it's all stupid, the joke, because that's the kind of character it is. Now, maybe it truly thinks that, or maybe it's kind of intimidated by things, and so that's a defense mechanism, but opposite reactions going on. And a third character, I'm imagining maybe like a big, quiet character, and it's actually pretending to listen to me, but it's completely engaged in its own mission, which is to secretly lean over and nudge the other person's marshmallow into the fire so it burns. Like that. And if it does that, it's like victory, and it just has a big smile while the flames go up. So that little scenario is just one of a million that could happen where you go, it's not enough to have general movement, general plausible stuff happening. You have to go, what is this one? What is this other one? How do they reflect either an iconic established fictional character or reflect a person that's real because they're projecting live into the situation, or they have an accepted surrogate. Like I knew an instructor that wanted to do that, where he was happy to have himself presented as an AI surrogate to teach with physical fitness and nutrition. He was very brave about this many years ago, but he cautioned all of us, rightfully so, when he started out, like, I don't want Google search to go out and find answers. I don't want any data scraping to have answers to health questions. I wrote several books. I researched this stuff. I have a point of view. I want all of it to come from my archive of information and perspective. So none of this gathering from where they were and putting it together. Like, I have my point of view, and I want a firewall that stops at my opinion.
Yeah.
And I look at, so that was a real guy who wanted to really teach. And he had a set of clients who depended on him to teach. And he didn't want to fool them with his AI character. He wanted to say, I'm going to help reach more of you by, I'm building my own AI. And it's going to go out and train you. Now, if you encounter anything that is critical to your health, I have systems in place that will detect that you need some real help. I will personally come in, deal with you one-on-one, no more AI. But, it was a legitimate way to use AI to step in and help him really expand his way to teach, instruct, be useful to people. So everybody gained from that experience. But I looked at when I was at Disney and I was trying to build, AI characters that we knew. Like one of the characters we worked on for a while was Dory, and Ralph from Wreck-It Ralph. It's like Dory and Ralph shouldn't find the same data and just say it with a different voice over it. It's like, right. There's a way to we have to build systems so they do much more than just what everybody's relishing in right now. That you can kind of do a lot of impressive, and it is truly impressive, but a lot of impressive first pass stuff. And that's a good way to push concepts out there and try things, but to really build characters that we will care about and that will continue to exist, whether they reflect real people or fictional characters that emerge as iconic and one of a kind that we have to protect over years. I mean, you don't want to dilute characters that have emerged as connecting beautifully with people that become iconic. You want to keep them honed. In fact, if you want people to dig even deeper into the thing that made them magical over time, if you can, rather than just going, yeah, we had the first flash of it being fantastic. Now we can just sort of remind you of that in simpler ways, cheaper ways, and just rush past it. It's like, no, you have to keep it alive. Also, another thing that I think is really intriguing for this whole world of AI characters is that, we're used to that, the trick of making it come alive in a moment. So if you go for a moment with me into what we just talked about, having them emerge as individuals, now imagine that you can connect with that character through all different media. So it might be projected, and it has sensors, and we're able to project it effectively, life size in front of you. And so you walk through, you have no gear to wear, but you see it projected beautifully into a space, and it could say, "Hi, Sky," and it can engage with you, and you already have a relationship maybe, but it just has seen you when you're walking by. It's where it happens to be projected. Later on, like an hour later or 2 weeks later, you might put on a headset, and the character wanders up to you as you're engaged with something, and like, "Oh, hey, good to see you again," and you pick up where you left off. You could be playing a video game, you could see it in a movie, or have it walk up to you as a pre-walking audio animatronic figure autonomously in the park, and have it talk to you. There could be, you could get to know Yoda and see Yoda as VR, as physical, all different kind of ways. So to have the consistency across all those mediums and to build your archive of knowledge and experience with each other that's another layer that you're trying to account for. So eccentric individual one, not just an average of mass data, and then continuity of connection and shared archive. But now that you do that, you're still not done, because that character has its own life, its own activities. So for it to be believable, it shouldn't just be like waiting, doing a holding pattern until this guy shows up to say hi. It should be busy with something that a group of writers, storytellers say, well, for this character, this is its daily activity. This is what it's up to. So if you encounter it, it's in the middle of leading its own life. Whether that's in a story, or it's a kind of character that's more plausibly in our world or a future world, whatever, it's an ongoing story world where it exists, and it breaks away from that activity to interact with you. So is that Lucy over there that I see? Hi, Lucy. I see Lucy, the little dog.
We have a
She's
question.
Well, may I say thank you? My goodness, that nickel has a huge value, and a symphony of eccentrics. I'm going to completely steal that like an artist. And my goodness, the term idiosyncrasy comes to mind, and that you were talking about making a person unique, and that nudging the marshmallow into the fire is brilliant.
Well, I know people that might do that.
I do, but it creates that uniqueness. So again, thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for your question. And just one more thing I'd mention is that while pursuing that eccentricity of the individual, I saw someone who came and gave quite a beautiful big lecture. Had to do with a capture space where they could do markerless tracking and everything. And they could do a number of people at once. So my excitement was using that for emotion and personality and character and all of that stuff. They felt like that was pushing way too hard, pushing way too far. And so I asked them what they were using it for, and they said, well, to try to get the gesture palette of people at a cash register doing a transaction to buy a phone or whatever. So it's like I found that, okay, I guess somebody invested millions toward that research, but I looked at it the much bigger picture of, you have a tool now you can research, connecting, it's understanding the eccentricity of the one. So I mentioned, for instance, I said, Henry Selick is a dear friend of mine. We went to school together and we've known each other for a long time. His gesture palette is significantly different from mine. And and we all have different, our spike of difference off the average is what makes us unique. So he argued with me that using his capture space was premature, that I was biased because I had years of knowing Henry. And so I could see him at an airport in the distance and know it's Henry. And I said, beg to differ. I think I could describe to you his basic set of gestures that are unique. And you could go into a party with 500 people and find him in 1 minute.
Wow.
So it's like the spikes of difference are unique. So, and then I showed him, it's funny, I took pictures at a photo session. I actually have them here if anybody brings it up. But Annie Leibovitz took a picture of a bunch of us up at Cal Arts. It was a reunion of our A113 class from years ago, the first class at CalArts, and Henry was there, and on one of my shots, he's doing like exactly the gesture I was describing to this guy. But I think so many of the places that have money and tools have yet to get sort of mission statements that study these things that will, let us really see and hear each other genuinely in the space. You know, I don't want, if you and I step into immersive space and I'm moving my avatar in that space and you are too, I want it to be true to us down to our micro expressions. I don't want it rewriting, like I know a lot of people, you know, building models and they go, oh, I build a retargeting thing and it'll take your smile and make it bigger. I'm like, well, please don't. Because it's like, when I talk to my friend, I want to read the micro expressions I know. I don't want you to filter them either to decrease or increase them or change them to feel like another person. Like, please don't. Like, let us truly project that into our shared space so we can read each other moment by moment. And that's true of fiction, but it's also true of, of factual, of being with each other together, but also in fiction, in story building, character building, you want those micro expressions. And Meryl Streep, for example, I'm looking forward to the day that she is driving an avatar, and people of her caliber. I think being in immersive space and experiencing stories and acting, there's a novelty to that, and I hope someone is wearing a headset over here at the 360 camera and being in the room with us. But all of that novelty, again, it's going to get boring after a while unless we get to like really quality storytelling, quality acting. So to me, it's like, we're going to need Meryl Streep back. It's like, instead of us, in the early days, we're like, hey, I'll put on the motion capture suit and I'll do the thing. And, oh, you do it. And pretty soon you're like, okay, now we need Meryl Streep. Like, we need her to do it.
Well, I am currently putting together the Graham Kerr Galloping Gourmet documentary story. He lives up here in Seattle. And so we might be talking.
Excellent. Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
All righty.
We got a question from someone on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
that's going by Cadence Calvert, and they want to know, you have such a long history when it comes to your career. How did you get from animation to story to Imagineering? What's your story, Jerry?
Animation to story.
That's part of it too. What's your story? And what was that?
Have him show some of his stuff.
Oh yes, we want to see. Some of your stuff
Okay.
here.
Well, I could go into.
Those transitions.
Let me see if I can. If this one has the proper transitions.
That's a collector's item.
This has some stuff. We can dive into some of this, and you can let me know how it's working for you. Back when I was about 16 years old, I got the opportunity to go in to visit Disney, and that's a whole story in itself. That it's a crazy situation that happened in my hometown, but I had no idea how to get to Disney. But we could go into it another time, or maybe later today if somebody wants to. But there was a crazy set of circumstances where I got handed a phone number to call the production manager of Disney Feature Animation. So I did. And this was one of my first passes that was given to me. This was probably 1973. And so it was passed for me to go meet with Ed Hansen, who was the production manager, and a map of the studio. And actually, there were a number of Walt Disney's famous 9 old men that were still working in the studio back at the time. So Milt was there animating at his desk. Willie Reitherman was there. Frank Thomas, Eric Larson, who mentored a lot of us, and Ollie Johnson. So they were all still working and animating when I went in as a teen. And I started mentoring under Eric Larson. And he took me under his wing while I was still in high school. So whenever I had a school break, Eric just gave me a desk, said, this is where you'll be. And we don't really have an official training program yet, but we're trying to bring in people as we can, find people that we think would have a good feel for this. And so this will be your desk, and whenever you have a break, come on in. So my Dad would drive me down and drop me off at the studio for a couple of days at a time. And then they decided to start the CalArts character animation program, and they asked me if I wanted to be the teacher's assistant. So I said yes, and I did a whole summer of prep. And so I was preparing materials that I thought my fellow classmates might enjoy, and I went out and we started the A113 class. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but our class number.
I am.
Cool. Well, it's been passed around in a lot of movies. So this was our first team. So
I love that photo.
yes, Joe Lancicero on the left, and there's me looking all too coy with the embroidered shirt, and there's Harry Sabin sitting on the floor. I actually think that this shot
And
was
there's Brad Bird.
taken by
Yes.
Harry Sabin. Yes, and there's Brad Bird and Bruce Morris and Doug Luffler and John Lasseter and Mike Cedino. So there's a lot of us that stuck together and did a lot of cool things. Yes, I used to look that young once. That was back in college days. Anyway, after 2 years, 4 of us became college dropouts because we were drafted by Disney. So me and Brad Bird, John Musker, Doug Leffler all took off after 2 years and went to work at the studio. So I became a Disney feature animator, and they took some of these glossy photos back in the day of some of us as we were just starting out. They wanted to tell the story of new people coming in. And so I worked on things like, I helped him at the end of Pete's Dragon. There was cleanup happening where we had to work over photostats with the live action and try to carefully register everything where the live character or an object might touch the animated character. The small one, Featurette, I became a full-fledged animator on that. And then I was an animator throughout The Fox and the Hound. And this was a photograph of 4 of the 9 old men and some of us who were younger that were starting it at the time. And they gave me this photo, and I guess everybody that was in the photo, they gave us the glossy when we were done with that. It was pretty remarkable to have 5 of the 9 old men in one picture. We had Eric and Frank and Ollie and Willie, actually four of the veterans. And so I'm in there, Glenn Keane is in there, there's a number of us. They were recently doing a history about the 9 old men up at the Disney Family Museum, and Don Hahn saw this picture on my website, and he said, I can't find this in the Disney archives. Can you please share it with me? So I got out my glossy and did a high-res scan and sent it to him. But it was just remarkable to be at the studio at a time where the veterans were willing to teach and were trying to pass on principles to us to carry on with us, and encouraging us to go out and reach out into our own lives to bring content into our art. They were very, very much cautioned us to try not to just copy them. They would remind us, we went out and studied nature, we looked at our friends and all of that, and that's where we got our material from. So please don't just copy us. Rebecca Rees, we've been married for over 40 years now. And she came in from Art Center, I came in from CalArts. We met at Disney, we both mentored under Eric Larson. So she was also in the animation department. Let me see here. So I'm trying to get to the next slide. Here we go. John Musker and me and Daryl Van Sitters having fun. We just had so much fun together in the animation department in those early years. There's me and Brad Bird goofing off, having fun. Tim Burton having a good time with us. We just hung out and did a lot of cool things together. It's funny, you don't see that so much these days, but when we were working diligently on films back then, we used to just have unannounced days. Like we'd have Pirate Day, or we just had Coors Shirt Day, and we would, in addition to getting our work done, we would do sort of silly things, and it just sort of helped keep us in a good creative frame of mind. Here's John Musker doing the I think I'm going to kill you face, which he told me that he said recently he saw that. He said, that's kind of my quintessential face. This was, and I'll get more into the segue into Imagineering in a moment, Alan, but I just much mentioned this. John Musker did this caricature of me, The Flying Feet of Death, and also sort of the Cinderella's slipper thing, and being grilled because I had accidentally put my foot through the wall of the animation department hallway. We had every Friday we'd have rubber band wars, where it was like the serious big rubber bands that you put around animation stacks of animation drawings, and so at the end of the day we'd have these fights. And so I found out in our hallway that I could hide in my room and jump out with my back turned to the group that was shooting rubber bands, take the shot in the back, and then turn around by stomping my foot against the wall and doing a power turn in the air, land and shoot them. So that worked, but my foot went through the wall after I did like the third or fourth one. And it was one of those things where everybody looked at each other and went, I have to go home now, and they just left. So I was alone in this hallway with my foothold through the wall. Anyway, Ed Hansen was the production manager was very forgiving, and he knew that we burned off steam and that I hadn't meant to put a hole through the wall. It just happened. Just some more activities with us together. We were at, I think, John and Gail's wedding reception. Brad Bird and I, and Doug Leffler, and Gail, and a bunch of people. Anyway, it just gives you a sense of the life together. Was doing also things like we made Star Wars outfits back in the 70s to wear to a party. So we were doing things like that in addition to animating. Tim Burton and I spent quite a bit of time together doing creative things and traveling for about 1.5 years. And we went up and visited Brad Bird when he was getting set up in Northern California. And so anyway, that just gives you a flavor. But I wound up actually doing animation outside of Disney after I'd done it there for a while. I worked on Tron. Maybe I should show you Tron. But the sort of cliff notes are, I did a gig in the animation department. Then Tron came along. I jumped onto Tron, and I was on that for the duration. And then Brad Bird and I were dreaming of starting a feature of The Spirit with Gary Kurtz. So we went up north, and we tried to get that off the ground for several years. I have some photos of that too that I could share. But when that finally didn't get traction, I wound up getting called by Tom Wilhite, who was a producer at the studio. He handed the Brave Little Toaster project to me. That's a whole story in itself, but I did the Brave Little Toaster. When I came back from doing the Brave Little Toaster, I was called by a group that was working on a project for the theme parks, and it was called Back to Neverland. I'll just jump onto that. That was my first foray into the theme parks. I will bring that up here. Back to Neverland. So I had just finished with doing the Brave Little Toaster. So I had my whole Disney career, then I had this sort of Tron career that was inside of Disney but experimenting with new things, and then did the Brave Little Toaster. And when it didn't get the release, we were just sort of licking our wounds after not getting the theatrical release we had hoped for. And I got a call from Bob Rogers and Company, and they said, we're working on a project for the theme parks, and it's about what makes Disney animation special. And since you had a whole career as a Disney feature animator, we figured that you would probably be able to guide us towards what makes Disney animation special. And so they had been working for about 9 or 10 months, and they said, we're actually afraid that the wind's going out of the sails, that we don't want to lose the project, and we'd like fresh eyes, and we'd like you to come in and see what you think. So the idea was Disney feature animation, what makes it special? And I told them, look, I looked at 2 versions that they had. They had a Donald Duck and Carol Burnett version. They had a Siskel and Ebert version, which was, they were 2 movie reviewers at the time. And, it was interesting, but it was all technical stuff. How many drawings per second, how the cells were painted, all that kind of stuff. So I said, look, that's not really what makes animation special. It's not about the tech. It's about the emotion. And I told them, look, every department is the story department. You don't just pick a color because it's pretty. You pick a color because of what it says about the character at that point in the story. That's the true, same thing with things like costume design or props that are in a scene, etc. So every department, the sound department, the color department, every department is the story department. And I gave them this saying, which I had coined this when I was arguing with a producer that was trying to get a bunch of us to do rotoscope. I said, it's not how you move the drawings, it's how the drawings move the audience. I had been arguing with this producer that I was looking for animators that would be good actors and good storytellers and really dig into plus every scene. And he was annoyed by animators that would think too much about anything. He just wanted to them shut up and trace. It's like, I'll go shoot a live action scene. I want you to just trace it. So I left that production, and this was earlier, but I had coined that phrase when I was talking to him. I said, it's not how you move the drawings, it's how the drawings move the audience. So as I sat with this group with Bob Rogers and company, I said, we should use that philosophy as the message of this film. So I had put together a story scenario. I said, I think you should bring somebody into the story who's just gets to go in and experience what all the emotions are like and feel how the story department is, how every department is a story department, and feel the music, what the music is doing, feel what the color is doing to them. And so they suddenly called me, it was the next day. I had just given them my opinion, said, here's what I think you should do. But they actually put in a call to Disney, and they said, you know what? The project we've been working on for the last few months, we think we're going to put a pause in that. We're going to start over, and we're going to use this guy, Jerry. So I was shocked to suddenly be pushed into the director's chair. I had just come by to give an opinion, but my passion equaled being hired. And then the question was who I wanted to cast. They said, cast who? I wanted to cast Robin Williams. At the time, he hadn't been, this was before Aladdin. And so I just said, oh my gosh, it'd be so great to work with Robin. Just, you could bring him in, he would be like a kid in a candy store, like, I get to be a cartoon, and oh my gosh, it's like look what the color's doing to me, look what the shapes are doing to me, look, every department being the story department. So I thought, well, he would really feel it moment by moment and be a kid in a candy store. So they told me, well, studio, Jeffrey and company, said, look, he's great for Touchstone and things like that, but this is not about Disney feature animation because, we've got families to think about, we've got the Bible Belt, all that kind of stuff, and Robin, and they use these terms, I didn't, crotch-grabbing adult comic with substance abuse problems. So I said, oh, okay, go back with me, if you will, to Pinocchio. Do you think Pinocchio was a charming Disney movie? And they, yeah. I said, okay, do you know who they cast as Jiminy Cricket? His name was Cliff Edwards. His stage name was Ukulele Ike, and he worked blue. He made sort of charming, dirty records at the time. So, and he had alcoholism as a problem. So you could actually go see Pinocchio in the theaters, and then mom and dad could get a babysitter and go to a nightclub and hear him sing dirty songs, So, and sadly, he died years later, an alcoholic. But, Walt saw past those problems to just somebody that was truly gifted and had charm. And boy, did the best side of Cliff Edwards get forever memorialized in that film. And I just said, whatever his future, Robin has that same gift and more, and just wouldn't it be great to just bring him in and capture that exuberance and creativity in our project. So they kind of accepted the argument, like, okay, I guess Jiminy Cricket is kind of equivalent. So they let me go pitch him, and I got to pitch Walter Cronkite as the straight man that would be operating with him. And basically the film has Walter Cronkite, who used to be revered newscaster, talk to a crowd, gets a volunteer from the crowd who's going to go step by step and find out how Disney animation is done. Robin Williams steps out of the crowd and he picks him, takes him on the adventure. So that was the setup. By the way, this picture, which appears to be at Disney Imaging Studios, was not. It was taken down in Hollywood at Raleigh Studios, and we just built a very large water tower to look like it was at Disney Imaging Studios, but it was not. Roy Disney got very involved with this. He really cared about how the film would go. Ken O'Connor came out of retirement to do our color styling. So, boy, he really put into action that idea that color was part of the storytelling, and he did a whole color flow for us for Back to Neverland. And we did things like built giant book props for the set. So as we talked about story and starting with writing and storytelling, we had those giant books on the set. And Walter Cronkite was just wonderful, and Robin and Walter worked together just great. And it was so great to see their friendship develop during the shoot and then continue after the shoot. So I went to meet with Robin later in New York, and he said that he and the Cronkites were still getting together for dinner and stuff. But here we are on the set. I was teaching Robin to fly. He had in one area, he had to come flying with a crane. And so we shot stuff with the two of them on a soundstage to be very sort of stream of consciousness, beautiful storytelling. It felt sort of like Fantasia. And then we designed what the animated Robin would look like. So he starts out in the film as himself and becomes an animated version of himself. And here's Bruce Smith, who was my actually directing animator for this. He was my key animator, flipping a scene for Robin and letting Robin see what he himself would look like if he came alive. And Robin just loved it. And here's Franz Fischer, who animated a key metamorphosis scene that I think really led to Robin being cast in Aladdin. And I'll show that to you in a moment. But Robin, it was the sweetest thing. I was able to record his voice in San Francisco, then come down and start the animators animating on his voice tracks. Then I went to film him in live action after that. So by the time he came to the set, some of his animation was already done. So we were able to flip scenes for him. And I just spent some time to have Robin talk to the animators while I was switching to another set. And he just came to me later, and he didn't have to do this, but he came to me later and just said how moved he was by meeting them and what special people they were. And he just said, oh, I was really flattened, they're really amazing people. And just sort of had tears in his eyes. And so he really appreciated the hard work that was going into it. And Rebecca, this was like a fuzzy picture, but captured the essence of the feeling. He signed a picture, the real me, on one of her animation drawings. And a bunch of the animators pitched in as well. And if I jump over here to this scene, I can show you a little bit. So we'll have some audio now, Steve. So this is one of the moments in Back to Neverland where Robin is stepping into that world, and he goes through a metamorphosis that I think truly led to him being cast in Aladdin.
Our stories with pictures as well as words. We bring them together here on the storyboard.
It looks like a comic strip, Walter.
Right, Robin, and this is the title of your story, Back to Neverland.
Walter, I was thinking maybe you're going with Peter Pan, First Blood. Coming in with twin Uzis going, we've got a problem. Something like Captain Hook going, maybe, maybe not, sucker, let's talk.
No, you're being cast as one of the little lost boys.
Boy, you look so puny.
You're a sympathetic little character, someone we can all feel for.
You really think that people could feel for me?
Oh, certainly. We'll feel suspense when you're alone aboard the pirate ship.
Yeah.
We'll feel frightened when you're captured by Captain Hook.
Yeah.
And we'll all feel sorry when you're thrown to the crocodile.
Yeah, me too.
Whoa, what? Walter, what's this? What about crocodile? What do you mean?
Don't worry, there's a happy ending. This is the sound studio where your voice will be recorded for the film.
What? Like these are my lines? Help, don't eat me, ouch. I thought you said there was a happy ending, Walter. For who? The crocodile? No, don't eat me, no, please. I hope you choke on me. Hey, Walter, what happened? Now I'm just a voice.
You see, Robin, you provide the voice, and the animator does the rest. He brings you to life on the page. It really amounts to acting on paper. When the drawings are viewed in sequence, they seem to come alive.
Hey, look! I'm a cartoon! Hey, Walt, just how far can you go with this?
You can do anything that he can draw.
Hey, animator, what do you say we have some fun, huh?
All right, let's go.
I can be anything. I can be
Just a tiny person.
or make my eyes really big, or maybe have legs that are real long. I can even be you, Walter Cronkite.
Now hold on there.
Can I do this? I'm happy. I'm grumpy. I'm dopey. Hi, everybody. I'm a corporate symbol.
Hold it, whoa! Are you fellas finished?
I always wanted to do that.
So I think Robin did always want to do that. And after that, John Musker and Ron Clements, I got to school with John. They saw that metamorphosis scene and really got a kick out of him and thought, aha, this could be the genie. And I was so glad that we had already gone through the hurdle of having the powers that be think that Robin might not be appropriate for animation. Boy, did we go over the hurdle with our short film in the park. People just fell in love with Robin, of course, and that paved the way for Aladdin to be for him to be in Aladdin. And I love that. And it was such a sweet thing that John and Ron invited a bunch of us from the cast and crew of Back to Neverland to go to the premiere of Aladdin. And they said, oh, we put a permanent tip of the hat from your short in the feature because, it wouldn't have been this film without that leading the way. So we went to the premiere, and like for the first 5 minutes, I'm looking like, where's the thing? And then I forgot about it because I just was caught up in their story. But near the end, when the genie gets his freedom, he's zipping around through time and space. And one of the iterations, he comes back wearing a very similar outfit to what my live action Robin had at the beginning of our film. So for those of you that want to win sort of little trivia things at parties, that's one of them. That's a little nod back and forth between two crews. And that was the first piece that I had done that overtly was stepping into theme park film that was going to play for years there. Yes.
Yes. Now that you're talking about your time making, theme park attractions, I got a question from Preston on video chat. Steve, if we could unmute him. Preston, I hope you're ready.
Yes, you can.
Okay, Preston.
Are you still here with us, Preston?
I see your name. I don't see your face.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi,
Yeah,
Preston,
I'm
yes.
having video challenges, but yeah, I wanted to know if you could speak a little bit to your time working on Mystic Manor, one of our favorite attractions.
Oh wow, that was super fun. I was told at a certain point during the production, I was contacted by Joel and Cicero and a few other people that were on the show, and just what an amazing project that was. But they decided to hit pause at one point and said, there's a lot of money that's being invested in this, and we're not sure that the big climactic scene is measuring up and warranting us building this entire thing. It's like, should we really pull the trigger and build if we don't feel like the experience itself has the sort of the finale built in? So I had the pleasure of being called in to say, be the fresh eyes, please. Look at the whole project, try to figure out how the story would flow through and how that big climactic scene might be the topper that it needs to be. And if so, then we'll unpause and get everybody back to work. And so that was my first task. And I think I have some of it here. I definitely have some of the preview stuff I did. Here we go. So I wound up doing that, and they did. I introduced things like the Albert, the monkey, trying to put the magic back in the box. So him being caught up in the big storm. I introduced the idea of the wall breaking open. So that wasn't a thing until I introduced that. So I said, you know, it'd be great if the storm gets so bad in the room with projection that it blows the wall open, and there's some more projection beyond that to feel like it goes out into, it's taken over the whole park. The park doesn't exist outside anymore. It's all the storm. So anyway, they did feel like, okay, that feels like it's getting the big finale that it needs to be. And I had mocked it up with a video that previewed how it might look. So they said, yes, let's unpause it, let's start. Although it was rather a funny thing that as soon as they started again, and we were back to working on it together, and I would do these things like illustrations of how Albert would look in the animation to match the way he was disheveled in the audio animatronic form in the park. But I'll pause here just for a second. We got back together, and that one room where that had been the big challenge, like, let's make that scene great. Everybody finally was like, cool, that's the scene, let's do it. And then everybody brought in their budgets, and we were so over budget for that one room. It was like millions over budget for one room. So then it was like panic time. So I had to do a session where I sat down with him, and we'd go through, look, you know, I did a chart where I took the whole 360 room and would say, here's where the story's going around the room. And I would do things like I purposely took pandas that were in one painting. So you were in a room with silk paintings on display in that big finale thing. I took a panda from one of the silk paintings and purposely swept it out of its own painting around the room to another spot where the wall was going to break open. So I would do things like that to lead people's eye. And then I sat with people who were doing the budget and went, by this point in the story, I want everybody to be looking here. So we can not do the most expensive projector in the world for the opposite side of the room, because if we did our job well, everyone's looking over here. So let's put all the money here. So we did exercises like that to try to get a handle on the budget. So we did then, and we were able to work together with a very specific strategy. And so everybody calmed down and got back into gear, and we made the thing. And I would do, then they said, well, in addition to that one scene, which was my first task, why don't you direct all the rest of the media? So I loved that invitation, and so I would go in and I designed the mosaic, the Medusa mosaic, with the before and after, so it actually could be accurate. So I designed it and then did where in the original version the snakes would be hidden. In fact, I think I have the video here that I can show you. So I'd break through exactly how the A, B of that would work, and not just be an animation trick, you could physically build it. I animated the lava flows and stuff, and I did the mock-up animation of in the Egyptian room where all the bugs are going crazy and flying in your hair. We had, in that scene, the lights would go out, and in the dark we had little things to come down and tickle you. But first, in the visuals, I had let all these bugs fly. So that was fun. Here is an example of a how-to video that I would give to the team before they would tackle a given effect. So this should have some audio again. Fair warning, Steve? Yeah. Okay. Oh, that wasn't it yet. Here it is. Here we go. On display in Mystic Manor's Mediterranean Antiquities Room is a piece of pottery featuring a fight between Hercules and a lion. The media includes both the animated figures and the static texture over which they move. These two-dimensional elements are designed to be projected onto a three-dimensional pottery shape. The foundational animation of Hercules includes his movement on the surface of the pottery and his movement beyond that surface. As presented in the attraction, Hercules' jump is conveyed by the projected media in sync with a physical puppet. It's hidden inside the pottery and pops up into view on cue. The puppet character, like the animated character, is constructed of simple, flat shapes that pivot on the XY plane. The appropriate mechanisms for movement are hidden on the backside of the flat character, and the up-down movement is supported by a simple post. With show lighting active, the folds of the curtain and multiple cast shadows disguise this support post quite well. while a more elegant solution for disguising the mechanism is certainly welcome. Even this basic approach will provide the public with an extra wow moment to reinforce the magic of the experience. So for each one of the scenes, for the fresco where the lava would happen, for this scene for the Medusa, I would do a breakdown video like that before they would start the build of it to help inform them. And we did this really cool thing. I got to work with Tim Landry, who's a genius in visual effects and storytelling. And we did some experiments even for things like the magic that gets loose when Albert opens the music box. He's not supposed to, lets the spell out. We didn't want it to just be standard pixie dust, so we tried different patterns of movement, and actually the laser projector couldn't use as much textural detail as we wanted, so we had to simplify it. But we were able to accomplish the basic thing we attempted, which was to have the movement be more like crab-like and grabbing as it would move forward, almost like it was trying to grab you as it came forward. So instead of like Tinkerbell's sort of beautiful, like splash everything as it goes, it was like, I'm going to grab you, pixie dust. So we did this sort of psychological play in that space. And I have here another one, I believe I can bring, where it goes down. I think it's not quite as high resolution a video, but it goes through the Medusa. Where is it? Mosaic breakdown. There we are. So this is how I explained the Medusa. The Medusa mosaic is displayed in the Mediterranean Antiquities Room. This mosaic is built as an actual three-dimensional relief made of translucent material, plastic or resin. Aging is textured directly onto the translucent material. The master tile pattern holds the designs for both the before and after images in the same layout. Each tile simply changes from an A color to a B color, causing the A and B images to appear. This two-color shift may be accomplished through thin layers of OLED material mounted directly behind the relief, or it may be accomplished by shifting back and forth from black light to full spectrum light. In this latter case, it would be preferable to use black light in the before image and full spectrum light in the after image, so as to make good use of multiple shadows cast by the snakes. The mosaic is built in sections. The main section accounts for everything except the snakes. The negative shapes, which accommodate the snakes, are left recessed, with a finish that looks like the mosaic's ancient backing with bits of cement and cracks. The snakes are laid into these indentations and hinged so that they can swing outward. This display is quite large and seen up close, so the use of true relief shapes for the tiles and the unexpected reach of the snakes outward toward the guests is preferable to a simple projection. So anyway, it was super fun to go through, and instead of doing traditional animation or filmmaking, to be thinking about props in a room that had to tell a story along with lighting and soundtracks and everything else that was going on, and try to basically figure out mechanical means to pull off the effect. So you weren't just telling people, use magic. You had to go like, well, I have at least one theory of how we could do this, and you're welcome to improve it if possible. But so that's what I did. And there was so much fun of invention. I remember when the lava comes down, and I had carefully copied people in frescoes, old frescoes from Pompeii and stuff, and I was looking to try to be honest to the style. So I've done the people sitting there with their drinks, and the mountain erupting and the lava pouring over them and covering them all except for their hands. And Rebecca, my wife, was just walking by, and she went, "Oh, it'd be funny if they clinked their glasses after they're covered with lava." And I went, "Good idea." As I just put it in. So every day that's playing in the park, just because she had a fun idea when she walked past my desk. And that's, to me, that's so fun. It's just being in a creative environment for yourself and for your team. And it was fun on that show because we were able to work in sort of boutique size little teams, and they would send me for sometimes for weeks at a time. They said, go to your creative cave. That's what they came up with the term. Go to your creative cave and bring back some more stuff. So some of the time I would be in-house working with a team. Other time they knew, like, if I just hunkered down with all my room full of equipment in my home studio, I could work even better magic there sometimes. So they were perfectly fine with me working that way sometimes. So that was super fun. And then it was great to go write it.
We got a question about Brave Little Toaster.
Aha.
You transition to that?
Sure.
And then after that, I'll have someone actually ask you through video chat. But this one needs to be typed out, so I'm going to ask you right now.
All right, okay.
So we got a question from Rusty. Rusty wants to know, a handful of people, myself included, have been looking for the model design sheets of the characters, archival and art reasons. A couple of them were found through an auction site, but some of the ones we were looking for are still missing. Radio, blankie, air conditioner, etc. Do you have these copies still? And if so, will these scans ever be released?
You know, my wife and I were just looking at that. You know, our time together on Toaster, so much of it was 6 months here, 6 months overseas, and then 6 months back finishing the audio, and it was just such a constant stampede of work that we weren't really thinking about things like archives. Although I have recently dug up some things where we did bring a few boxes back from Taiwan with us. Several years ago, a number of years ago, there was a writer doing liner notes for David Newman's score. So the CD that came out actually had, if you go through the liner notes on that, it's like a terrific tiny coffee table book. It's like the best making of history written about our film ever, and it's in like quite a few pages, but it's in that CD. For him to be equipped to put pictures in and his research, we gave him quite a curated box of things, including some of those model sheets. And recently, as we were preparing to come in and do the Reese's Pieces show, and we have our Brave Little Toaster corner in this room, we dug out that box that we had given to that author, and we said, you know what, there's a bunch of stuff in here we hadn't thought about. It's just been, sitting in the box. Quite a few model sheets. I think all the ones you mentioned we have.
They were blankie, air conditioner, radio.
Yeah, I think we do, and I'll try to have those by next weekend. We're doing the Brave Little Toaster. We can have those copied in here, and maybe I can make them available on the CTN site for people to see. But yeah, that was fun for us too. And sometimes a couple things. It's very nice. We were able to find. Oh, maybe you can grab it. It's the model sheet for the Lampy's broken bulb. when Lampy goes through the part of the story where his bulb breaks, we had it's on a stand. It's paper, and you should see a bulb with a break pattern on it. Well, just a circle, basically a circle with a break pattern on it.
Gotcha.
He found it. So in addition to the standard model sheets, we had specialty model sheets for certain things the characters would go through. This was a classic moment where, here you go, yeah. So his, Lampy's bulb breaks. So Rebecca worked out the pattern of the break and then drew it from all the different angles. And she actually took a ping pong ball and drew the pattern of the break on that, and had an exercise where everybody that was assisting on the film doing in-betweens and cleanup took the ping pong balls and took the template on it, traced it, and used an X-Acto blade to cut out a physical ping pong ball with this break. And so all the animators had a ping pong ball with this break pattern cut on their desk to help with it. So that we'd use the rest of the model sheet for Lampy, but when it came to the bulb during that part of the film, they would bring out the physical ping pong ball and knew how it was oriented in his head, and be able to draw it from different angles that way. And so that was we couldn't find the ping pong ball. We had it for years, and somehow that got misplaced. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody went, "What is this doing?" and threw it in the trash. They didn't know it was something special. And do you want to?
We have, sorry, you were asking?
Go ahead.
Oh,
Another question.
we do have someone that wants to ask questions through video chat. So, Steve, let me know when you're ready. It's going to be Kira that's asking.
Just sent her the request.
Okay, Kira, we just sent you the request.
Hello.
Hey, there's Kira. Well, we got a little bit.
Okay. Yes.
Kira.
Question.
Yeah, I have quite a few questions. Well, I'm trying to think. Oh, right. So there's the Discord server that a lot of us are on, and we were wondering
Right.
about the.
I guess there's a conversation going on in Discord.
No. Well, yeah, there was a conversation that went on. I'm just trying to think of it. It was about someone had found there's a website that was like about all of the characters talking about home, things like that.
That might have been
Yes.
something that I wrote called Reflections of a Toaster. And
Yeah, you wrote it?
I did write it. I had done
Oh, okay.
I had done some musings about the possibilities of another adventure. I never saw the 2 sequels to the film. I made the first one. All of us that worked on it were very involved with it. As a crew, caring for each other and caring about the characters, and it was we felt like we were doing something truly creative in our career. We have been trying to do something that was not just a product and that we could be proud of creatively as a team, and we felt like we had finally been able to do that together. And so when later it went on to become sequels, and I felt like there was more of a force of product to sell and everything, I frankly never watched them. So, but I was just going through the exercise myself to say, because I had in the past, actually Yair Landau, who was a producer with Sony. I don't know if you are aware of him, but Sony Animation did a number of features. So he was involved with everything from Cloudy with the up through Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, I think. So a number of features there. He had contacted me and said, this was a number of years ago. He said, I would, the original toaster stood the test of time. It has a following. I feel like as a producer, I'm curious about what if I got the people, if I got the original writer director, and then got whoever he would choose to work on a team to resurrect that property and do a proper sequel that ignores the other ones that happened. Just pretends the first one happened and now this is the next event that happens after that. And would you be interested? And I said, well, yes, definitely. And so for a while we were promoting that. It got caught up in all bunch of legal things, but that still freed my mind to spend some time thinking about something that would really center on the value of home as a theme in many different ways for many different characters. And I wrote that piece that I put out on the internet. It's just at, it's called reflectionsofatoaster.com. And I didn't really promote it at all. I just did it as something that was kind of almost like a reflection, almost a therapeutic, just kind of little creative exercise of my own. And then once in a while when people would ask, I would say, oh, well, go, you can read this thing I did. It's kind of a fun essay about being in that emotional space. So a few people have, and I think more people have found out about it recently, but I've actually had it out there for a few years now. But I definitely, I had somebody read it recently and who is in the business and who is a producer. And he got back to me and said, I felt like the characters came alive again. Like when I read that, I felt like they were living, feeling characters again and not just, another product in a movie. So he said that thing that you guys found in the first film, I feel it reawakening in that kind of approach, that kind of writing that you're doing. So, if I ever do get a chance to really tackle another feature, I wanted to already have just explored some of the emotional space that to me was important to make it a meaningful film. And I'm still working on a lot of things that I think would help it become a full feature in the same way that we did with the first one. But those were the just early musings about themes, and I had a lot of fun with that. So it's out there.
Kiara, thanks for asking that question. I didn't know about that, so that was really interesting.
Oh, Alan will have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up now. Jerry, if you want to do this, we can have Kiara ask one more question, and then we can have like a short intermission, and then she can ask her other questions after.
Sure.
All right, sounds good. Kiara, do you want to ask one more question, and then we'll have intermission?
Yes. So.
Okay. Go for it.
My question is about the first script that was done for, but when you were added into the mix, like, what was the script like? I mean, I've heard things like within the Discord server that there was
no script.
No, I meant just like whatever there was.
Yeah, well, I can go through a little bit of that in a deck here. I'll just jump to a relevant page, and it kind of breaks down some of the thinking that I had to do to get it from a short to a feature. So let me see, that will be toaster. And then here we go, director's perspective, and then I jump to the page. So yeah, I had a whole breakdown that I did for people that were curious about the film. Okay, I will jump here to there's a few beats that'll give you an idea about what had to happen. So when Will Hite asked me to get involved, he said, Lassiter was going to make it at the studio. Joe Rampton and Brian McEntee were starting to be involved as a concept team, and they're great. But he said, everybody said it would make a nice short. It's not really a feature. And they were going through different political things, and John was fired, etc. And so Tom Wilhite bought the property, took it out of Disney into independent zone, and he called me. He found out I had just become available. I had been working with Gary Kurtz and Brad Bird up north. I had just stopped a phase of work up there, and within a few days, within the first week of me being available, he called me, flew me down to LA and said, I have this project. It's called The Brave Little Toaster. Everybody's telling me it's a short, but I think it could be a feature if it's developed and written properly. I think you're the guy. He handed me the book, the novella to read, and he said, I don't have much money to offer. We ultimately, by the time we were done, had only $2.25 million for the entire 90-minute feature. But he said, but I know you've been starving to really create something, so I need somebody to develop it and write it and direct it, and I can let you have freedom with that. So he said, I can't give you much money, but I can give you that. So I started working on the different things I would need to do. I don't know if people can read this online, but it's in the room. We can see it here. The ensemble of characters needed to become a collection of individual characters. So I actually had somebody get in touch within the last year, and it was very interesting. He said, usually what happens is I see a film, and then I go read the book, and I find out more about the characters. I get deeper into it. But he said the opposite happened. It's like I knew much more about the characters from the film than I knew from the book. How did this happen? So I told him, well, that was one of the first challenges. So instead of just saying they will go along, and in fact, I'll jump to that right now, and then I'll come back to this page. I'll jump to the fun character bio stuff, and then I'll come back to that breakdown page. But this is the fun of taking the inanimate objects and finding relatability in form, function, and emotional puns. So I went through this exercise with Joe and with Brian. and went, okay, let's really get into Toaster. Toaster would be warm, obviously. Toaster's durable. Toaster feels responsible for providing nourishment. Toaster feels useless when her coils aren't glowing. Others see a bit of themselves reflected back whenever they're near her, so subconsciously this makes them feel comfortable in her presence, but they don't know why. Knows the miracle of being repaired. I imagined a Play-Doh incident that where little Rob might have put Play-Doh and it melted and the dad had to take it apart and repair it. So the Toaster would have gone through a near-death experience and has an appreciation for caregiving. And I also just really thought it'd be nice to have a character where, because everyone else feels reflected, that a flower thinks it's seeing a flower in Toaster. A squirrel thinks it's seeing a squirrel in Toaster. Lampy sort of feels a little lampiness in Toaster, like they all kind of feel a bit of themselves reflected back. And so it makes her a central character, and so it's a he, it's a she, it's all different things that it needs to function for the different characters. I went, okay, Blanky, instead of just being cute, it's accustomed to warm cuddling. It's the very definition of a child's security blanket, and without the child, it's an insecurity blanket. So I went, okay, that's the essence of Blanky, is an insecurity blanket without the kid. Lampy, I thought, imagines himself brighter than he actually is, and sometimes he's pretty dim. Makes up for it by being the eternal optimist, always looking on the bright side, so trying to play with light. Radio, always on. Vintage form is eternally tuned to vintage airwaves. So it just, when Lovitz later, he came in and auditioned for me, and he was just doing all this, it's a news broadcast, and he was doing all that just as a stand-up comedian. It's from Emmett's Field, it's a headline drive of the bad field. He would just do all that stuff, and I just thought, well, it's great if just the old-time radio, it looks like old-time radio, and everything that comes out of it is just somehow magically old broadcasts. Considers himself the color commentator of the group for everything. So it's like the play-by-play in sports. It's like he's the play-by-play in just their lives. Kirby, I went, okay, he's really strong, industrial strength. Sometimes it sucks to be around him. Obsessed with ridding the world of clutter. Doesn't communicate well since he's designed to hold things inside. So that was a basic thing. It's like his function is hold things in. Holding things inside for too long eventually leads to a breakdown, which does happen in the film. But it felt very relatable. As a human, it feels like, yeah, the metaphor for that, the symbolism, it's like, I get it. I have felt that way. Air conditioner, cool. Above everyone else, like Jack. And that's something that happened. We had not, we'd gotten a handle on the other characters, and we were madly scrambling to get the film together. We didn't have traditional schedule where it's like, do the story for a couple of years and then do a reel for a couple of years and show it to audiences over and over again and tweak it until it's just right and cast the voices and do it 100 ways. We just had to all overlap departments and rush forward. So I had already decided on the way some of the other characters would be defined, but not the air conditioner yet. And he was still just kind of angry. So he hadn't really become the sort of cool Jack Nicholson character. But Joe Rampt and I were occasionally, as we were all working, Will Hite would say, hey, Jerry and Joe, there's money people coming by. Why don't you pitch some boards, and they might invest a few more pennies to help us out. So I would go up and pitch a board, and then I'd pull mine out of the way, and Joe would come up and pitch a board. And we would do voices for everybody, and we just were having fun with that. And we just together, Joe and I used to goof, and I used to do it with Rebecca back at Disney, where I was doing a little bit of the Jack thing. And so one day I just lapsed into that, and Joe started snickering. The next time he took his board up, he went into the Jack thing too, and I finally went, oh my God, there it is. It's like, he's cool, air conditioner cool, like Jack. And the story has him above everyone else, which makes him feel sometimes better and sometimes separate. And it's just the Nicholson tie-in just seemed perfect. So it was a comes the dawn moment for me. I went and locked the door and wrote that entire scene in one setting. The whole confrontation with it and all in that tone was just once the idea locked in mentally, just it was one writing session. And I opened the door and then handed out pages and we wrote it. When he overheats, he blows a fuse like Jack. And by the way, there was a moment where in the story, and I'll go back to building the story. Originally
cheering for air conditioning right now. They're going crazy over air conditioning.
Yes, he is cool. But yeah, there was a thing, and I'll go into this quickly here. So we were back with doing the ensemble of characters. I just took you through that. Then I went, okay, the story structure overhaul. The second act, Junkyard, was moved to the end of the third act. I just, when I came in and looked at just the concept boards they had done, there was a Junkyard, which they'd gotten from the book. It was in the middle of the movie. It wasn't the big finale, hellish, where they go at the end and might die forever. It was just one of the adventures they passed along the way. So I just looked at Brian McEntee's amazing boards and I went, oh my God, this needs to be at the end. This is the third act finale. This is where all appliances go to die, and unless there is a rescue. And so that was one of my first things, was shove that, and then look back at the story and go, okay, now how do we get there? And I went, okay, I need to like the person that you're journeying to meet. So I introduced the idea of the kid master, that they were abandoned in the story, but they were truly abandoned by a person who left them. And I thought, well, I don't really like that person. I want a journey to meet them. They just went, I'll walk away from them. But I went, if it's the kid of a family, it's like the kid's not responsible. And if they really bonded first primarily with the kid, then I still like the kid, even if the family moved away. In fact, I'm as empathetic for the kid as I am for them. So I went, okay, that's a step in the right direction. And then I went, well, I want a reunion with that person at the end. As well, which is not in the original story, that you don't stay with that person, they're handed off to someone else. So I went, I really would like, after all this trial and adventure, to wind up with the person that they dream of and have that be the happy ending. So that was another change. And then and also showing over time that the kid grows, still wants them. I thought that was really interesting, that you could see the passage of time, and I purposely saved that in the film to not know how old the kid is until you get to the city, and then showed like the young picture and the older picture, and then seeing him as a teenager, and went, oh, this is how much time has passed. So that was using the kid who's now growing as a way to tell us how much time has happened. And then that also played into the air conditioner thing. In that scene, he has so much angst over being separate from everyone. And he says, I can't help it if the kid was too short to reach my dials, is part of his angst when he's about to blow up. Well, later, you see Rob has grown tall enough to reach his dials, and in fact, he repairs him. And when he gets him going again, repairs him, there's little Freon tears that Steve Moore animated. And Roland Jaffe, the wonderful director who did things like Mission and Killing Fields, told me that he said, you got me to do something I didn't think would happen. I actually cried over a cartoon appliance. But, building a moment like that where you go, it wasn't in the original book, it wasn't in the original development, but just feeling that there were gaps, there were things that were needed. We were able to build things like that for the first time in this new version of the story. Okay, next thing up. So we needed a third act where the stakes brought everything to a head. So having the beloved master, who wasn't in the original book, and they weren't reunited with, say it's a kid that grows up, and by the way, by the time they get to the end, he's in peril. That was not in any of the development or book. And now you needed a moment for the toaster to truly be brave. So, the idea of actually put him in physical danger on the conveyor belt and have the toaster throw itself into the gears was like, none of that was in the book, development, any of that. That all just came out of feeling how much once you have group of characters you care about and feel like their journey is invested in reaching a destination that's worthy, and then how do you put that in peril and have it be a must happen save, that where it's like everything is at stake at that moment. So that was a major difference. And then needed casting to influence the writing. So I was doing all of that story work, and by the way, all that story work, 4 weeks with Joe, in a room with Joe and me and index cards, and but I just thought Brian McEntee added so much value that I definitely put him in the credits for screen story. But it was 4 weeks to get the story enough in shape to really start churning out pages and get ahead of the production. But now I needed to actually write the dialogue in the script, so I went, okay, I need voices in my head that I can depend on. I want to know who's saying these lines and write to them. So did a casting call. Some people came in and performed, and I just hated my own dialogue. I was hearing it, and it was awful. And I just was so depressed because what was happening was they were coming into a project that was called The Brave Little Toaster, and they were reading appliance things, and they just tried to sound as stupid and novel as possible. And in my head, I was hearing sincerity. I was like a sincere character who cares and wants to get somewhere and wants to feel useful and is scared of being out of date and scared of their warranty running out. To me, that was all relatable human stuff. And then all that was taken away with just this goofball performances. So Joe had been taking some classes at the Groundlings Improv Theater just to hone his skills while he was doing animation and storytelling. And he said, there's some cool people down there. You want to go listen to them? And I said, yeah. So we went down, and that was a gold mine. That those people did the opposite of what I'd heard the others do. The other people were saying, how can I take this moment and make it as crazy as possible with my voice performance? At the Groundlings Improv, they had the opposite thing, where people would tell them a crazy thing. They'd say, okay, you're a stalk of celery and you're a radish, and where are they? They're at a bus stop. Okay, and what happens? They fall in love. Go. So they had to take something crazy and make it seem plausible. It's like, how would a radish feel about a celery? And go, you wanted to get to the I can relate to that moment. So they were constantly doing that challenge. So when they came in, they did the opposite. They're like, well, these are characters who need to feel real. And their vocal performance then was exciting. And then I got everybody cast in the positions. And it's funny, Deanna, it's wonderful. She's going to come for next week's reunion, and Tim Stack as well. John Lovitz, it was great. He was with our Zoom reunion last year, but he can't make the physical one this year. But she reminded me that she was trying to do like these big flamboyant character things. She wasn't thinking of the toaster. She was trying to be air conditioner. And I just told her, I love just your voice. And she's like, what? It's just me. And I'm like, I love that. So I just had her be Deanna for the toaster. And that helped you get ready to write everything. And then needed a square one script that we could depend on for the schedule, because we didn't have in the schedule test screening and changes and revisions. It was just make the movie once and it's done. So you had to depend on the screenplay, and then needed shot-specific cinematic boards in the Spielberg tradition. No changes as the boards go through the layout process. So it wasn't like, well, these boards are suggestions. They'll go out to layout department and they'll do new camera angles and everything. It was like, well, first of all, as a director, I kind of like to choose the cinema right up front and then find ways to accomplish it instead of going, I don't know where I'm going to look. I'm a director who just wants things to happen, and later somebody else can tell me where the camera goes. It was like, no, I would like to decide that. So then we took all of those changes to the original book and to the original development, all the stuff that was brand new, and then turned it to shot specific. So not a single panel of the boards existed in the previous incarnation. Whatever's pinned up at the wall, other than Brian's beautiful, junkyard things and some of Joe's situations. I think there's 4 lines of dialogue that I kept from the book, and and the environment stuff that Brian had developed really helped change the story. So that was great. And then, so anyway, those. I can go into more specifics about boards and things, but those were the big differences between what was happening earlier and where we took it. And I can just show you quickly some storyboards where it's the cinematic script. So here's the scene, and on the left are my boards, my rough boards, and that's only how finished I took them. And on the right is the final frames to film. So it was where the picture that they were fighting over, a picture of the master, crashes on the ground and they're all shocked. And then I had the down shot, and one by one they come up to look down at the picture. They're very sad. And then you look down on it and the wind starts blowing and you don't know why. And it's cold wind. You see icicles starting to form, and then it reveals there he is. There's the air conditioner. And so you can see the boards and the shots from the roughs, they were tiny roughs, stayed very much on target throughout the process. So that was how we went from like just a pell-mell production, quick production where we couldn't spend time changing and adjusting. I just really wanted to commit and go, these are the shots and let's make them. And by the way, I won't, I don't have enough organized to do a whole thing on this, but these are some of the boards that I've been scanning. I scanned over the last few months 2,820 individual storyboards from the film, which were in a box until a few months ago, all the way from 1986 when we came back. And I was still working on the film into 1987, but it's just the boards were no longer needed and were in a box. So some of them are that small. Some of them never got past pencil sketch form, not even into final rendering or anything. That's some from Cutting Edge. Some of Alex Mann's rendering, one of our wonderful storyboard artists. So some of them got a little bigger with some mood like that, but a lot of them just stayed small. And even these are enlarged from the original sketches that they were very small. And then we enlarged them slightly to be workable for pinning up on a board. And actually we have some of the original backgrounds. I just had showed the storyboard of them being in the tent. So this is the storyboard of being in the tent, and up there is the final background of being in the tent. So that's been hanging on my wall for a number of years, but that's the real thing. So there was this direct connection as we were telling the story, and every day the animators had to do enough work every day that normally they would have taken 2 weeks to do at Disney. And so since we had such a continuity of intention where we would go, these are the lines, this is the shot, there's the shot realized. Brian had worked with Ken O'Connor, who's a wonderful stylist, artist that worked back in the classic days with Disney, with Fantasia and all great classic iconic movies. He had come out of retirement at Brian McEntee's request to come in and work with us on color design. So he would look at something like this little sketch of the tent and go, how do I do the color flow so that it encapsulates the mood that's needed for this part of the story? And he wouldn't do every single board, obviously, but we'd make sure that he got key anchor points for the emotional changes through every sequence. And he wound up doing a set of miniature paintings that went all the way through. So he did a bunch of miniature storyboards that are paintings that I could look along with him and study the entire emotional flow of the entire feature. And so when we got to time to paint backgrounds, we had a template. We had storyboard angle you could rely on, and then we had a color guide that Ken had done, and it could lead to those final paintings. Now, if you quickly take it over to the flower scene, I don't know if the lighting is letting you see that, Alan. But that's actually the Oh, a lot of reflections. That's the original painting and cell setup for the flower scene. Sorry, the reflections are so bad right now. But that was one of the cases where Brian McEntee would occasionally, as we're charging along with the storyboards, being very reliable, he would say, "Hey, Jer, I really would like to open this scene up. I know, like Daryl's original boards at that moment were tighter. Is it okay if I widen it and let you have the scene breathe and feel more of the scene around it?" And so I welcomed that. I was so glad that he was looking for opportunities where he could embellish plus. And so I was so glad that he did that. And it wound up being just a beautiful, more of a theatrical little moment, because we were staying focused entirely on the toaster and the flower. And to feel a little bit of the mood of the scene around it was just a delicate framing that really enhanced it wonderfully. So it was just great working with people that had that creative plussing thing in mind. Even on a insanely fast schedule where you're doing 2 weeks of work in a day. And the nice thing was we had no time to fiddle. Like, I would do the board and go, this is the shot. And then Brian could come to me and say, can I widen it because of this reason? And if I just went, yes, good idea, it was just in. Like, there was no studio to send notes to and do test screenings. There was like none of that. It was just, we were together making just decisions many times in a single day and charging forward. And so it felt very personal to us when we finished it, because we had just lived and breathed every moment so vividly. But I do have all of those. Now, the 2,820 boards that I have in this folder
Jerry,
are.
take a 5-minute break at some point.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. We need to do a tech check with our.
Okay. But you can see, for instance, this is the radio starting to perform Tutti Frutti, and they're watching, and they're bored. So I've got the boards now individually scanned. I don't have them yet cut into edited sequences. I would love to do split screen where you see the film playing on one side and the boards playing on the other side. And I'm going to try to start with a few as soon as possible. So, but it's a lot. But there are some sequences missing. There's the City of Light scene, that song. I can't find it in my board archive, and quite a bit of the swamp I can't find in my board archive, but still a lot. So there's probably like 85% of the film, every shot is scanned in this folder. And at this point of being daunted by so many boards, I think we're going to take a break for a moment and then get back on with you. So Alan and Steve and Ramiro, I think we're going to do a little taking a break.
wish for, please ignore all my cries for answers. Hurt no more. All the moments come together, moving picture, worn and weathered, all because of the fall into love where minds are baffled and time wins once again. Wash away the dancer, no one's there. Playing with the train set up until the sun sets. Always something we could do. Showing me your workshop, teach me how to build stuff. I really do love you. You should know that my grandpa Harold is the strongest man I ever saw. The world don't need violence, it just needs more violins. Gramps would make them through and through. Running till he's 90 always could inspire me. Passion always burning true. You should know that my grandpa Harold is Some people just need time to breathe. Everyday fire grows inside. It keeps us going, the warmth makes us feel alright. At least we can say we tried. To new beginnings and dreams from which we used to hide. The future is looking bright. smile shows you aren't always sure. Your heart is on the I'll take all you wish for, please ignore all my cries for answers, hurt no more. All the moments come together, moving picture, worn and weathered, all because of the fall into love where minds are baffled and time wins once again. Wash away the dancer, no one's there. Playing with the train set up until the sun sets. Always something we could do. Showing me a workshop, teach me how to build stuff. I really do love you. You should know that my grandpa Harold is the strongest man I ever saw. The world don't need violence, it just needs more violins. Gramps would make them through and through. Running till he's 90 always could inspire me. Passion always burning true. You should know that my grandpa Harold is the strongest man I ever saw.
Okay, I am unmuted.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the CTN studio stream of the AMA of Jerry Rees.
Howdy.
So we already have a question. Welcome back from intermission. Preston has a question about Galaxy's Edge. And the question was about Ellie. Wants to know more about Ellie. And also if you have any other stories to tell us about that land.
Right. Well, gosh, you know, Ellie was tipped to the public pretty early. We, for a while, were tasked with building the idea of a gigantic beast that could roam around, and as part of that world. But we were keeping it extremely under wraps. And then there were stockholders meetings where we'd see like, oh, there's a painting of the beast in the crowd, and people would notice it and go, hey, what's that giant bantha or whatever. So we're happy that people were aware that we were hoping to get a creature like that. I mean, there's so many plans. In the future, they can just keep growing this place beautifully. But that was a hope that certainly I shared early on, is that we could have in the crowds, in the same way that you'd see a castle, and it's just a castle in a place is like a central thing you look at, that here you'd see this creature that's head and shoulders above everyone else and with people riding on its back. And my personal mission with it was to make sure that it wasn't just a big sculptural thing that was impressive because it looked so big. My background is the illusion of life, first with drawings, and then in CG, and then in audio animatronics, and in robotics and AI, and conversational characters and everything else. So my dream was, could it seem alive? Could it behave in such a way that if you got close to it, it could seem alive? So in addition to some of the bigger initiatives like prototyping big parts of giant moving things that could emote, I was working out things like storyboards. And so here's just things that I experimented with. So I had part of Bridging Worlds. Imagine you're in a theme park and you come across an animal, a big one, and it, like a really big one. So my fantasy was, okay, a kid would even have a safe encounter with this gigantic creature that could slowly lean down and express curiosity and like sniff the kid and look at it. And having expression in the eyes, we were talking about, I made a whole chart for the team to look at eye expression. Because, you know, on a big creature like that, if you're back, you see, you know, a lot of the creature and the eye is part of its expression. But if you're up close, it's a pretty big, just single eye. So you want that to be expressive. So I was dealing with pupil size and lid positions and cheek expressions and brow furrows and things like that to give you a whole range of different emotions, and in envisioning this intimate encounter. So yes, you have the big epic look from a distance, but the magic is you can go up during some quiet time where it's not walking around and get to know Ellie and have Ellie remember you. And next time you come back to the park, even if she's doing a gig and she has 6 people on her back walking and you walk in and you wave and you call out her name, she could turn to you and do like a trademark little, some kind of bellowing thing that you had agreed was your thing. And so you could realize, okay, Ellie sees me. It's been 6 months I'm in the park, but I called to her and she recognized me and gave me the little shout out. So I had things like feeling touch. We had like hot breath. We had doing expressions. So you could look into the mouth of the creature and talking about how to do things like a moist tongue that would articulate and everything. And then turning around to see that big expressive eye come to check you out, you know. And if you go up and start to pet it, it would sense the touch, and it would have sensors back far enough to really see whole body language and interpret it. And realize, okay, you're doing that scratching, so it would start to make happy purring sounds and stuff. And do expression in the eye where it looks dreamy. It's like a cat that's purring, except a giant creature. And just be like an unforgettable moment of bonding. And the cool thing is, it's once you've done that, there's an imprinting that you and Ellie would have ongoing then rapport in the park. And I actually was hoping for times that we would be able to do things like invite people to, and this is just this is not an approved design. This is just me experimenting as part of the team to say what would happen if her fur, like people could come out and groom her in the morning. And so they'd brush her fur and then weave chimes and bells into her fur, and so when she'd walk along, she'd be like a wind chime, a giant wind chime. And so it would be different every day because you'd have a group of people that would become the Ellie groomers in the morning, and they'd get her ready to go on her journey. And then you would appreciate from distance, you'd hear the bells you had helped hang on her clang as she moved and make this sound. So many people put in designs. This was not an approved design for a final at all, but it definitely was my way to convey an experience intention. And I also did things like I would experiment with how people might load and unload from baskets that are lowered on her back. So it's how do you clamber up onto a big beast like that? And I also had just the great fun of writing a backstory for her that could potentially be used. Again, it was just my exercise. There were certainly some people in the team that enjoyed it and expressed that it would be in line with the whole canon of the mythology. But I had tried to do a story where, in the Tuscan mythology, where there's a bonding with the young ones and these animals that are different types of bantha, and that it's a bonding that lasts for a lifetime and starts young. And so I had envisioned a storyteller. I had a young male storyteller of the village, and in their mythology, a storyteller is critical because that's how all history is kept, is through verbal storytelling. And if you lose that, your group doesn't exist anymore. It kind of is the proof that you exist as an entity, as your stories being vividly recounted. And so I had her growing and bonding with the storyteller, and at the same time I had brought in an adopted sister for him who's of another race. So I checked in the in the mythology and in the whole canon that was acceptable to bring someone in under the umbrella of your culture who's different, but not accepted as a storyteller, because you have to be pure blood from your original group to do that. So, but loved by the family, is the adopted sister of the storyteller, who is the approved one. I then did a situation where, and this would all pre-exist her existence in the park. The storyteller had been swept away during a battle. People don't know whether he's even alive anymore. He's wounded somewhere, captured, we don't know. And puts the whole group, the tribe, in real jeopardy because their existence rides on the storyteller. Now, Ellie's still there, and the adopted sister of the storyteller is there. She's the different race. She knows all the stories completely by heart. She could absolutely step in, capability-wise, just be the storyteller. And Ellie knows all the stories, and she's been listening to them for years, so she knows all the different parts of the stories and would be responding emotionally. I could imagine having a storytelling session where Ellie is part of she's one of the audience members for listening to the story and just make it vivid. But she's not accepted to step in as storyteller. It's just, they won't accept that from an outsider. So, in my story, she and Ellie just went out on a quest to go, well, we're not accepted here. I don't know if they'll even exist anymore. Maybe we'll find my brother. Maybe we'll rescue the group, bring him back, save him somewhere. And I had taken them both through an adventure where they got scars, where both of them wore physical scars. So I was hoping you would meet someday the adopted sister and Ellie walking through the park, both of them with scars from the adventure they shared. And, it would leave the door open for storytelling, for the potential of them finding the adopted brother. There could be the reunion of the brother and sister, and Ellie with her long lost original bonded companion happen right in front of you in the park. So there's just a lot of opportunity. We talked about just everybody participating in just the rich storytelling potentials, even having young, where we were, I was already dealing with pre-walking autonomous robots that were smaller than this. So we're like, well, it's the baby. She could have a baby, and you could meet Ellie. Ellie, be proud of introducing you to her baby. But the whole desire was to make it plausible, just seem absolutely real, have it seem absolutely conscious, and not like a robotic or physical thing. I mean, a manufactured thing, to seem living and breathing. And so a lot of excitement about that, and I'm sure in the future, continued excitement about that. But I was so glad that the potential was thrown out early to the public, and that's why I feel any freedom to talk about any of this is because they acknowledged in the concept art that went out at stockholders meeting and stuff, here's the land, here's the giant beast that people are riding on as part of that place. And I'm glad they did that, because with all of us sort of knowing that it has the potential to sprout many aspects, including something like that. It keeps you thinking of the whole land as a vital, growing, evolving space, not just one thing. It's something that has character that can continue to evolve and expand. So that's the basic thing. And then I also just had great joy. I was made creative lead for a year. I'd have been a couple years creative lead on conversational characters, but did a year with D309, the communications droid on the Galactic Star Cruiser. And ultimately, when there was a huge plans were disrupted when COVID came along, and then thankfully a core team, including Sarah Woolfolk, who's genius writer of AI materials, stayed on, and they were able to do a version of the character aboard the ship. But it's there now, and so it's a version of the character. Before COVID, with the much bigger team, we were dreaming of many more capabilities for the character, but it was the communications droid. And back in the day, I was early exploring, and these are things you've already seen, the public has seen the final one, but I was exploring other options earlier, just on my own, as I was creative lead on how the character would behave and interact. I was also taking a stab at what she might look like. So these were just my sketches. I was picturing her able to take cables and plug them in, sort of like old-fashioned, you see the operator in a hotel, and they're like sliding along in a chair and plugging things in. And then they would retract in her head, and it was kind of like dreads. And I had also written a backstory for her. And so she was much older than she seemed to be, and was parts of multiple droids that had all been part of the history of that Star Cruiser. And so I wanted people to mistakenly think she was one manufactured droid, but she was actually the cobbled together survivor pieces of a droid across many chapters of history on that ship. And that there's one part of it has a scar that was made by some iconic character that was in an earlier era that isn't even around anymore. And then there's another part of her that has where Princess Leia herself pried a restraining bolt off of her during her era. And so that would be on her back, you see a shoulder circle where she has her back to you. That's where Leia actually pried it off of her and freed her from the restraining bolt. And it had things like her hand keep falling off, so she had to put it on, her shoulder plate would fall off. But it was because, truth is, she's cobbled together pieces from many eras. Well, they went a different direction, but the thing that we all really kept on target with, despite all, playing with different potential visuals and things that would fit more, most effectively in that world, is we kept the through line of wanting you to really feel like you had a relationship with that character that would build over time, and that whatever thread you were taking for the adventure, whether you were, on the, rebel forces or imperial or whatever, that she would eventually reveal to you what side she was taking, but have respect for you as either a worthy opponent or an ally, so that you would find some way to connect and respect no matter what your journey was. And the job was to legitimately find a way that even if you had tried to give her hell, and she just your whole thing was I'm going to provoke this droid, that she would find that you were a chess player, and she had to hand it to you that you were good at that. So we tried to find ways that that you would connect. And the more some of the deeper sensor-driven things can't yet happen. I hope they do in the future. But there were things, I would get so excited, and some of the other people would just going, give us the full package of sensors, and we can just make this thing live and breathe and be in the moment. And they'd go, no, you don't have permission. Legal won't let you do X, Y, and Z. You can't remember that face, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. So, and that everybody's dealing with that. That's not unique to Disney in any way. It's just everyone that's wrestling with how this new technology is used. But we had things that our whole team that was putting her together, and it wound up being a pretty damn big team. Even though I was creative lead, there was a giant army of people. But people would just get excited about the potential of her remembering, for instance, that you're going to go to a certain place where there's a mechanic that works in this area. And she kind of has a thing for this human mechanic. And she says, hey, Alan, if you see him, like, I have you a message. Come here, give you the message to give to him. And then later, if you turn on the screen, she'd see that it's you and go, what did he say? Like, that's her opening line, because she recognizes you, remembers what happened. Now, reality is it's like, no, you can't remember his face. You can't do that. You have to go, hello, or, you have to start from square one, kind of, and then try to pick up what you can. And then maybe if you swipe a band, go, oh, it's Alan. Now I can ask the question. But, being somebody motivated by that full illusion of life thing, I just wanted you to see the moment the screen came on, see her either, it's like your friend. So you're behind her, and she knows you have the secret, but your friend is there. She doesn't want him to hear. So it's like, hello, like, play it very cool. Hi. And then as soon as they're out of the room, so what? I was like, that's what I wanted. and I think, all the creatives were on board with all of that. It's just, we now have to, as a group and as individual creatives, struggle with how do we get permission to implement those things. And part of it is making it safe and private, and part of it is having people feel it happen enough so that they welcome it. They go, oh my God, that's magical. That feels, I have a relationship with that character, and I wouldn't give that up for anything. And but if you're just told, I would like permission to remember your face and do all this stuff, if you're just given a list of legal things, a lot of people would be like, no, opt out, opt out, opt out. And then the character's like, I don't remember you. I don't, it's like, and if they get a flavor of what it's like to have a character be your companion in that vivid way, oh my God, I think people would just go, yes, but you got to make it safe for me. You got to make it secure and safe for me. But hell yeah, I want all that. So that's one of the things we're dealing with.
That's really interesting. I have people that want to ask more about Galaxy Edge or Star Wars related questions. You want to move on to that? Or do you have something else? To bring up?
I wasn't involved that deeply, other than Ellie and D309. I was involved with free walking autonomous bots, and so that got into Guardians of the Galaxy, and it got into some potential for Star Wars, and definitely are the kind of things that could affect it. But I didn't, other than that year of trying to make your communications droid adventure unforgettable, and a couple years before that of conversational characters to try to make that even possible, and then pre-walking autonomous bots as a way to have characters step off a screen and just be in a world with you. Other than that, I didn't really get deeper into the specific Star Wars attractions. It was more the capabilities behind those attractions and how it would be populated. But yeah, I do.
You have another question, and it's on Zoom, so we could have them ask here with you.
Okay.
Steve, could we do that for Susan Grella? I believe Susan has a question.
Sure.
She can unmute.
I see a name, Susan, over here.
Susan, we sent you something.
Her mic's on.
Says your mic is on. Susan, can you?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Oh dear, I asked like 10 questions. Which one would you like me to ask?
I'd like to
Which
hear
one are you
number
thinking
7.
of referring?
No, make it 3.
I guess we're moving on from the Galaxy's Edge, unless you have something about the puppets that he brought up you want to ask, and the AI.
No, I can always go back to those things later on. Go ahead, Susan.
Maybe I'll just choose one of the questions that I asked. I wanted to, one of my questions was about maybe Imagineers thinking about design with zero waste in mind, or thinking about just the space and how to use the land in a way that perhaps protects the environment or thinks about the sustainability of it in long term as our next generation deals with climate change and that sort of
Yeah, that
thing.
I wasn't directly involved with that, but I saw presentations internally at the company with whole divisions and teams of people that were sincerely devoted to that. There were things that they showed us for helping the environment that were backstage of like things to help with water storage and things to not waste and reclaiming things and all that. That wasn't even public facing. It didn't even, they weren't like showing it to the public, but when we would have sessions with each other and we had presentations periodically from all different departments. And so, yeah, I saw big, extensive presentations that would be an hour and a half long of just efforts that were going into the very kind of thing you're talking about. So I don't know how much of that is being talked about by the company to the public, but internally I saw that really evidenced where they cared and they had groups of people devoted to it. And I would watch that and go, that's so cool. You know, I was involved with an attraction inside of that, but over the wall behind, there's this whole thing with solar and there's things with reclaiming water and there's all this kind of stuff. So, it made me happy to be, while I was doing my creative focus, there were other people that were being very mindful of the world we're entertaining on, and socializing on. So anyway, I was really proud of what they were doing. Yeah, do you have another? You're muted now. Do you have another question, Susan? I'm not sure.
I know that Susan did have another question. Steve, do you think we could get Susan back?
I'll ping her again. She has the ability to unmute.
Oh, okay. Susan, do you want to unmute and ask another question?
Thank you for unmuting me again. Yes. Could you talk about the next? I know that it's you're very focused on the storytelling inside the parks, but in your expert opinion and in seeing the trends of storytelling and movie making, I guess, what is your opinion on the dome, that projection room being used to film the Star Wars series, like The Mandalorian? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do, and I saw early tests of the big LED walls that were in sync with camera moves and stuff, and the lighting, and yeah, I actually was aware of that months before most people were. The teams of us would go over and tour, and they allowed us to take home videos of it and stuff. Now that people know about it, it would be okay to break those out. But I think it's wonderful. I just have always been a fan of blended reality. I think that, like, to me, I know that there's or only AR, only projection, different things like that. I love the combinations of all that stuff, and I just brought this up just to show you some things I have experimented with. This was just before R&D asked me to come in and work full time. I had done this as an independent group, but we did multiple experience domes, and it wasn't exactly one-to-one with the high resolution LEDs you're talking about, but still it was engulfing people and experience. So we actually built the big, huge domes. We debuted it out in the fields of Scottsdale, Arizona, and it was called the Marvel Experience. I directed all the media in it. So I would do these rendered scenes that were in stereoscopic 3D. If you look at this image, the very center of that circle is the top of the ceiling of the room you're in, and the edge of the circle is the horizon all the way around. So it would map stretched from the top all the way down to the horizon. And so I could do patterns or story scenes or characters that were in that complete environment. Plus we had activities for people to do inside the space as well, and things like climbing walls and but it was just exciting to tell stories in that 360 environment. So here's it's odd to look at, but this was a stereoscopic 3D surround experience moment. We went out to the sky, it's in the snow. So all the way around you, the horizon is there. Meeting Black Panther.
So everything on top is behind you?
So, yeah, well, you were free to turn any direction you wanted. So it was the same as our 360 camera here. 150 people could free walk in that 80-foot dome and look any direction they wanted at any time. So it was up to me to choreograph it to try to make everywhere they looked entertaining for people, but guide everyone to look at a certain spot for key story points. And we had this moment on this 2D screen. It doesn't look like a big deal, but when we played it in the dome, all 150 people would gasp the moment that we moved up through this hole. You'll see Wolverine cuts a hole in the screen. So if we go to that feed for a second, Steve, you'll see Wolverine cuts a hole, and in stereoscopic 3D, everyone in the audience pushes up through to be among the soldiers. So in an 80-foot dome, when you went through that hole and like stuck your head up amongst all the soldiers and it's stereoscopic 3D, everybody would gasp. And so I became quite addicted to the potentials of working in that kind of storytelling space.
Enjoy your petty victories while you can, heroes.
I would do these, I would do the mock-ups for the animators to follow.
Enjoy your petty victories while you can, heroes.
So we had them in captured in containment chambers at the end when you'd walk out, and so we animated the breath on the window and really did do multiple panes of glass and stuff like that. But yeah, going out and being in these projection domes, multiple projection domes that you could explore, was just another fun way to do storytelling. And then, you know, of course, the high resolution LED walls where you think you're looking at real space is just amazing. And I can show you something where we started to get a feel for some of that. This was, I directed media for Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. So, you know, I directed all this stuff with Benicio del Toro here in LA before going out to Atlanta to meet with James Gunn and the rest of the team. So in the Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, I had done, directed the media, including voices for Rocket and stuff. But we, in the attraction, we have what we call moving eye point. So I had directed this media that you see when you're riding in this gantry and you're moving up and down 7 stories, and you're sometimes being pulled down at negative G's, so you leave the seat. But when you go past these screens and you see media, so there's an example, you see perspective change, and I'll back it up here, from the front of the foreground of the floor right in front of you, all the way to the background in the distance. Well, that's all moving eye point, which very much equates to the wall you were talking about, Susan, the dome, where it has perspective that moves with the camera. Well, this perspective we had rendered out to move exactly with the audience up and down movement in the attraction. So everything you see in front of their feet, where these boxes are and stuff, is physical, is in the room with you. Everything just before their feet and back to the distance is all inside the 2D screen. And there was no stereoscopic 3D glasses or anything used. It was purely your brain telling you, when you look at a flat screen that was high resolution LED and lit carefully, and with the perspective changing frame by frame, so it was a moving eye point to reflect what was going on with you in the car. Your brain would just tell you you were looking into a space, not at a flat screen. And it was quite effective. I have several shots here. These were just screen grabs I did of people's home videos in the ride. But people could sit at different places on the ride and still feel it happening. Had fun with this one, with Dave Bautista doing the with monster slime on him. I filmed him in Atlanta, and we had to cover him with viscous monster slime before shooting that scene. But it was just so much fun to be physically riding in that gantry and getting banged around and hurtling up and down, and for you to look at this footage and just feel like it's part of your world. Like it's like I'm not watching a movie. I'm looking through an opening, a door open, and I'm looking through into this big open space where all the Guardians are running around with these, mayhem that's going on. And the hanging gantry in the center that's dangling behind him, I had introduced that story point to the team. So initially they were just going to be stored in vitrines in the lobby, but I went through the logic with them and went, if the collector has them on display, he knows they can escape from anywhere. So he'd try to be the first one that outwitted them. So I had him put them on display in it's almost like chandelier that's hanging in the center of that tower over like these horrible jaws of death that are continually grinding below. So if they try to get out, they'll fall and just get chewed up. So in his mind, it's like, I'm the first guy that figured out how to keep those Guardians in captivity. It's like, I know they've gotten out of everything else, but not this. So we actually shot more story beats than are yet on display. And I think that's, Joe Rody and James Gunn, our whole team, we wanted to be able to eventually update with more and more chapters. So we included, when I went out to Atlanta, we shot things like, I had written what it would be like if you went up to see the collector's original show, where they're just on display and they feel very put upon. And you ride the gantry up and the doors open and there they are. And it worked, they're on display. Of course, Rocket hijacks your gantry, and then I had the moment where he calls to them and they can see from where they're hanging, like, oh my God, Rocket is over there. He got on that thing. He's like, we'll be back for you. And sure enough, like, he's able to go change some things and unlock their doors and then come back up to try to get them. So we did, I think, 10 Storybeat chapters in all that could eventually be rolled into the space. But it uses that moving eye point thing, which is slaved to the camera when they're doing the high resolution LED wall for something like the Mandalorian. We had it slaved to the ride vehicle that you were in. And also, key difference, ours was rendered, so it's baked in. If the gantry ever changes its path, it will look terrible because it won't be in sync with the rendered frames. But when you're shooting the Mandalorian, thankfully, wherever the camera operator takes it, it's ready to respond with the new perspective right then. So that's a cool thing. So and I just love all kinds of blended reality stuff. I have here just a moment. I can't show you what this was from, but I can just show you a moment where this is projecting on a person and having her, as she turns, the flower, like the dandelion and blossoms, they're tracking to her in 360, and they go wherever she goes. And they even have like physics engine and stuff built in. And so we did this years ago, and I haven't seen people doing 360 tracking. I've seen them do a lot of tracking, but that allowed her to just move anywhere she wanted and have all the media just follow her and stay glued to her in 360. So I'm imagining like projection walls and projection on people, and in both cases you don't need special equipment like head-mounted displays to make that work, but then some people that want to go into that world could, because she actually was driving an avatar in virtual space too. If you put on your headgear, you would see her avatar, but if you just were in the room, you could see her with that beautiful projection. So more and more as we can blend different tools to just make everyone is allowed into the experience. Somebody that says, I love my, Vive room scale headset and I want to wear that. It's like, cool, you can. It's like, but your friend goes, I'm not going near those. It's like, well, you don't have to, and you can still look into that world with them, and we can see you somehow and have you participate. So trying to head for that eventuality. And it's, I think step by step we're getting more people to see that the conjunction of those things, the meeting of those things, is as valuable or more ultimately than just staying in one silo of tech and only pursuing that one thing. So, all right.
Thank you.
Certainly. Yeah, that was fun. I went over to watch that, the wall. It was so fun. One of the people that had helped implement it in the first place was talking about a moment that he walked into the set. He was going to show off what they had done with the illusion of the set when it wasn't really there. And he stepped onto the set to show them and went, "Oh, they used a real set today. It's not activated." And then he noticed, like, "Oh no, it is. It just fooled me that much." So even the people on the team were just amazed by how effective it was. And then I'll just show you a quick thing, since I was talking about jumping from one thing to another. Here's an exercise that I did about just saying, what if you could have, a character that I worked on for a while that was just to test behind the scenes, was a conversational Dory character. So I went through the exercise of saying, what if Dory is just everywhere and spills across different media? So I went, okay, little girl's on a cruise ship with her parents, and she's eating her breakfast. I've got room service, and Dory is on her mobile, and she's her friend, and she knows, like, you're eating breakfast, I'm eating my seaweed, we're having a good time. And then mom turns on the stateroom TV and sees this ad, like, hey, we have this thing where you can put on VR goggles and you can feel like you're scuba diving. And my dream was actually have the point of view through those VR goggles be a real undersea drone, and that when you do swim gestures, it actually turns it. So I wanted you to be driving a real undersea drone for seeing through your glasses. So yes, you're not submerged, but your point of view is, and your swim gestures take it places. So that's the dream. And then Dory, with implementing all this connection of multi things, from her mobile, from the little girl's phone, can be like, hey, look at that. She sees the stateroom TV, and she goes zip off of the mobile, and she goes zip onto the stateroom TV, and goes, I love it. If we go scuba diving together, we can have so much fun together. Come on, let's go. Let's do this. So she goes, I can show you around. I can be your tour guide, right? So they're just like going, oh, that Dory, you just can't stop her. So they're getting ready, and as they're brushing their hair, the mirror, which is also media capable, she swims across it. It's like, you guys, you're taking so long. I'm going to swim ahead. So they're just like, Dory, she's so excited. As they're walking along past a giant screen that's entertaining a lot of people, there's a big entertainment going on of undersea for hundreds of people to see, but it senses that she's walking close to the bottom of the screen there. So her Dory friend comes up and swims right next to her, and it's like, good, you're on the way, I can't wait. So it's like she's just with you, right? So now they put on the gear, and sure enough, it's really clever. The VR goggles look like the, snorkel. And as they're doing the gesture, sure enough, it's the undersea is wrapped around them, but it's from drones that are capturing it at the time. And she can be mapped into that and actually show them around. Like, there's an octopus, there's a whatever, and have her really use recognition of objects and things like that to actually be a decent undersea guide. He would work with the AI system to make sure its undersea recognition was in good shape. And then afterwards, getting a plush doll of Dory, it's also AI connected. So as they're bouncing around and taking pictures, and mom takes a snap, it auto writes, Rosie and Dory say, just keep swimming. And it can also talk, so it can carry on the conversation. And then I went, okay, now you're not on the ship at all. You're at the La Brea Tar Pits in Los Angeles, and they're just enjoying this. And she's like, oh, I'm going to show Dory. So she does. And Dory's like, oh my gosh, what is that? So she's trying to explain prehistoric times and stuff. And then later she's explaining with the lump of Play-Doh and then of course you'd want to have Dory stay in character. And later if she says, we talked about the mammoths, and then the early period, the dinosaurs. And Dory's like, oh yeah, those little plastic guys on your bed. And it's like, no, they were big. So just have her kind of be a little ditzy. And then also to do things like, and people think this is robbing people, that's like too much screen time, but my hope was to say, she wants you to read a book to her. So she's like, read to me. So you open the book and you're reading, and she goes, read the next paragraph, and you read it. And then if you go, well, now you, Dory, then she could do text and she could read a paragraph, but then she's like, your turn. So it would really be encouraging, like, I am a fellow book lover, you and I are going to read together. So how much fun that could be. And then, so help them getting comfy for bedtime. So that's kind of, it was a, like, let's break out of the one device mode into just characters that are everywhere as we want them. You know, you don't say that's forced on you, or it's like a living pop-up ad. You opt in. It's like, I don't want any of this, or I want some of it. I want it with a certain character. And then this to me was just an exhilarating thing that I did talk to some of the guys at Disney Feature. There was some beautiful AI, not AI, but VR work that was done there. There was one, Cycles, I believe it was called. It was really touching. You put on, it's funny, we put on VR goggles, and he had, when we took them off, he had a box of Kleenex to wipe away the tears, because he knew it was going to be emotionally moving, and it was. It was about the moment that a family had to work it to grandma that she was going to have to move out of the home she's been in for years and be in a rest home. So, and then it went through like memories of the past, and if you looked around the space, you would see the earlier eras when they first arrived and moved in and all of that. So, but in reviewing that with him, I looked at some future work, and they had built environments for upcoming films. And they had made a space where the animators and layout artists and different people could put on the gear and walk around in parts of that world. And just for behind the scenes work and get ready to do scenes. None of this was for audience experience at all. So I'm like going, this totally should be audience experience. I would like to get to know your character. Like, I would like for you to plan, like, okay, we have our curated Once Upon a Time story, and that's going to be in our feature. But before then, I'm going to take some of these environments you've already built and characters you're developing, and let me explore it and meet her, and then meet some people I either should or shouldn't trust. You could have a little experience where as she's leaving, you hear a couple of them gossiping about something they're planning so you're able to tell her, like, be careful, watch out for those people, you know, and so you'd feel some investment. Later you go see the film, sure enough, it's like, I walked through those rooms. And I remember behind that big decorative vase, there was a guy hiding back there. I remember that. And he shushed me. And I wonder if he's still there, you know, and so it really invests you in what you explored now blooming into a story beat in the film, and possibly some things you told her in that first experience coming true. Either she didn't take your advice and she should have, or she did take your advice and you're thankful or whatever. And then do a post-film tag as well. And then those characters ongoing with a presence and with a life that they have beyond the frame in that world. When you connect with them, they're not just waiting in a theme park or waiting to talk with you. They're like in the middle of an activity that makes sense for their life. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, hi. And they like switch from that to you. So then that's a whole thing that story teams can play with and go, how do we build these ongoing connective stories to just keep going? And so I think it would give people a lot of engagement. So anyway, a lot of potential. But any other visual things that you'd like me to dive into? Maybe a little bit with the bots?
Oh, yes, please.
I won't. Oh, I didn't mean to start the online player. That was an accident. Okay. That was for my Dungeons and Dragons excursion. So I'll show you a quick thing here. I was creative lead on Pre-Walking Autonomous Robots. And this will just take 5 minutes to do two little scenes. So we had Behavior Bot, BB, it's our quadruped, and he really did use sensors to get around. So we weren't remote controlling him. And he would look and check people and do facial recognition. He felt touch. He loved it when you'd scratch him. He'd make little happy sounds. You're like, oh, love it. So that was fun for people. He had directional listening. We could do squeak toys and he'd listen. Then we moved to a biped and said, well, can we get pantomime that's universally understood for emotion with just 2 legs and a torso? So we did Dick Van Dyke Stroll. It's a jolly holiday with Mary. We started with that and said, it's a stroll. He's not just walking. And then we said, okay, can he appear to see and hear us while he's just a torso? And then we did Mickey's double bounce walk from the little whirlwind. We did sneaking. So we went, okay, people can universally understand the pantomime of emotion here. We did have a power cable and a safety in case he fell, but he was free balancing this whole time. And sometimes we just said, no acting required, just get around. And so he didn't always make it. But that reminds me of the Mickey and Walt moment. Then we could, but we would then give him a little fix-up now and then. And we decided Groot was the first incarnation. And then we did a story that was really emotionally charged to do range of emotion for better range of motion for engineering. And then we took a room and we bathed it. I'm going to stop it here for a second. We bathed the whole room in sensors, and we had an AR version of Groot. We stepped away from the robot for a second and said, later we're going to use these sensors with the robot, but for now we have an AR character, but it's going to see our gestures and interpret them. So again, we're not controlling him. We taught it that when Corey would bend down, he would interpret that as a friendly gesture and move toward him. And like, oh, I'm going to do a friendly thing. So you do like a fist bump. Then he hears me talk, and you'll see the dot that's hovering by Corey's face go to me because he heard me. And he turned. So that was really sensors functioning. Then we dressed him all up in the Groot outfit. He could self-balance and was ready to go. And then we did a lot of work on eyes then. And I was so proud of this moment, if I can find it. There was we took a little Groot. Let me see, Kiwi. I'll find it here in a second. Here we go. Guardians. I'll get it. But what I was focusing on was the way that eyes are used. So we did principles that eyes don't just drift. You can spend millions of dollars on a character, but if its eyes are just kind of drifting around, it will look dead. So we really spent time making rules like quick eye darts, because that's what we do. The only time we drift our eyes is if we're tracking something, and have the character be alive when it's not saying anything. So here's just a moment where Groot really, his eye movement kicks in, and you'll see him go from being a thing to being a being. So just watch this moment. So thing, and then his eyes go into that living state shortly. You see little eye darts lead the head turn, leads the body turn. So it's a little 3-part rule. So eye darts first, and then head turn second. So we're like, okay, he's a being now. He's not a thing. And he's self-balancing the whole time. We just had a safety cable in the lab in case he fell. Now he's a thing again. We had a guy from TechCrunch come out and tour, and we had him tuned up and dressed up, and we had all the eye stuff working. And he wrote an article about it, and at the end of his article, he said there were multiple times when he was just looking me in the eye, and I forgot it was a robot. And that's what you're trying to do, is the illusion of life. So sometimes the stuff all comes together, and just anxious to have it work for everyone.
Jerry, you're
Yes.
amazing.
Oh, thank you. It's all fun stuff to share. I don't know if there's any other.
I think we're gonna have to continue the conversation. Alan's got the dates here.
Oh, yes, all right. So, we're going to have to stop now, and we're going to continue this conversation on May 13th and May 22nd. So please join us, and Jerry will be back as well. And next Saturday, we have the reunion, cast and crew reunion.
Oh, yeah.
And so please...
Brave Little Toaster cast and crew reunion, yeah.
Yes, have your questions ready. We love the involvement here. It was great getting your questions here on Zoom and on YouTube.
Yeah, and we're gonna experiment with nudging this more and more into a casual situation where ideally we're trying to make it feel like we're all just sitting in a living room together. So we're gonna keep nudging things toward that eventuality, and I hope somebody does take the initiative to either do the look around with their screen, or ideally put on a headset and feel like they're just in the room with us for part of this. It'd be great to hear back from some of you if you've tried doing that. I know when it works well, it does make you feel present, and I'm hoping we can accomplish that, because if we could allow people to feel like they are sitting with us in this space, no matter where you may be, that would be great. And we have all different ways to do it, but that's the most immersive way.
All right. So we are signing off.
We are. Thank you very much, Jerry.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jerry.
We look forward to the next time. Everybody hold your questions.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Alrighty.
Thanks, Stephen.